The laughter hit first, sharp, merciless, rolling through the chandelier-lit hall like broken glass scattering on marble. A woman in a crimson gown stood at the center, her hand still outstretched from the throw, laughter pouring out of her like smoke from a fire that should never have been lit. The cake she'd hurled, white, thick, heavy with cream, spread across the face of the woman in white who stood perfectly still. Frosting smeared into her skin, into her lashes, into the neckline of her dress. It dripped like insult made visible. Gasps rippled in the crowd, but they were smothered by louder chuckles. A man in a bow tie slapped another on the shoulder, wheezing with delight. Someone near the back muttered, "Eat white cake, hide black," and the cruelty stuck, echoing above the music as if it had been scripted into the night. And yet she didn't move. The woman with cream dripping down her chin simply lifted her head. Her dress was spotless a minute ago, her presence silent but commanding. Now she looked like the punchline to a joke delivered in front of hundreds. But her spine? Straight. Her breath? Steady. Her silence sliced deeper than any retort could. The hostess in red leaned closer, finger raised like she'd just delivered a magic trick. "You don't belong here," she hissed, eyes glinting with the pleasure of humiliation. The circle around them swelled tighter, phones tilted at half angles, lenses trying to decide if this was scandal or spectacle or both. But the woman in white, the one they mocked, the one they thought small, didn't wipe her face, didn't step back. She simply looked at the crowd as if measuring the cost of their laughter, as if the frosting wasn't humiliation but evident. She remembered the hotel lobby in Charlotte when she was 16, escorted out because this space is for guests only. The bank lounge at 23 told her account was suspicious. The showroom at 27, mistaken for the assistant while her client who owned nothing was offered champagne. Every room had tried to shrink her. Tonight was no different. But tonight, she wasn't 16. She wasn't 23. She wasn't 27. Tonight, she was something else entirely. The air in the gala shifted, charged, brittle, waiting. A young journalist near the wall whispered, "I can't believe they did that," and pressed record. Two servers froze mid-tray, unsure whether to laugh or look away. A violinist stopped bowing, strings silenced by shame. And still she stood, silent, frosting melting under the chandelier heat. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was the pause before impact. The crimson hostess didn't know it yet. The crowd didn't see it yet. But the woman standing calm with cake across her face wasn't just a guest. She wasn't an outsider, or an intruder, or a nobody. She was the storm they had just summoned, and every second of their laughter would cost them more than they could imagine. She had chosen the dress on purpose, not couture, not sequined, not shouting for attention. Just white, clean, sharp lines, no embellishments. A blank canvas in a room built to display status like a trophy. When she walked through the marble entry an hour earlier, no spotlight followed. No champagne flute was pressed into her hand. She moved alone, calm, measured, as if she knew the room would size her up and dismiss her in the same breath. And it did. The hostess in crimson barely glanced at her when she arrived. A server brushed past her to refill another man's glass without offering her one. A pair of donors whispered, "She must be press," as she passed the bar. None of them recognized her. None of them imagined that the woman they dismissed had signed the check that paid for the chandeliers now glittering above their heads. She had come without entourage, without brand labels, without the armor of wealth most carried like a passport. Instead, she carried memory, the memory of rooms just like this, rooms where she was invisible until someone decided she was disposable. At 16, a lobby in Charlotte. At 23, a bank lounge in Miami. At 27, a showroom in Dallas. Every time, the same equation: black body, simple clothes, assumed unworthy. Tonight, she tested the equation again. Her name was etched into the foundation of this gala. $4.2 billion committed over 10 years to fund programs no one in this room would ever see up close. Schools, clinics, community banks, infrastructure. She didn't write the check for applause. She wrote it because power that isn't shared rots. But these people, these guests, These hosts thought tonight was theirs. And so, when frosting splattered across her cheekbones, when cream clogged her lashes, when laughter stabbed the air, she did not flinch. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Still, the details mattered. The tables glowed with candlelight, cutlery polished to a sterile shine. Men adjusted cufflinks like miniature weapons. Women's heels struck marble like gavel knocks. Every piece of the room was curated to scream belonging, to scream exclusion. The only person who did not fit their mold was the woman now standing with cake dripping onto her collarbone. A server in black uniform paused nearby, eyes darting between her and the hostess, guilt rising like heat on his skin. He wanted to help, maybe, but fear of losing a paycheck sealed his throat. Another guest, young, suited, hungry for proximity to power, laughed louder, hoping to be noticed by the hostess in red. This was the stage, and she, the silent target, was letting the scene right itself. She reached for no napkin, no handkerchief. She let the sugar sting her eyes, let the cream sink into silk, because this moment wasn't about her dignity, it was about theirs and how quickly they sold it. She stood, centered in the marble hall, the chandelier heat burning frosting into her skin, and thought, let them laugh. Every second they laugh is a receipt, and I keep every receipt. The room did not cool after the cake. It simmered hotter, as if cruelty itself had been sanctioned. The hostess in crimson lifted her chin, emboldened by the chorus of laughter. She brushed frosting off her manicured hand, then waved toward the nearest server. Clean this up, she barked, as if the woman in white were a spill on the floor, not a guest. The server hesitated, eyes down, tray trembling. He moved toward her with a napkin, but she raised one hand not to accept, but to refuse. The server froze, caught between obedience and shame. From across the stage, a tall man in a tailored tuxedo approached. His badge identified him as event manager. He didn't lower his voice. You're disrupting the program, he declared. We'll need you to exit now. Dozens of eyes pivoted, some hungry for spectacle, some averting to preserve comfort. He stepped closer, the smell of expensive cologne pushing against her space. This is a private gala, he continued, lips curling. Invitations are not transferable. I don't know how you got in, but you're leaving. The hostess laughed behind him, tossing her hair like victory. Security's on call, she added sweetly, loud enough for the microphones to catch. We keep this place selective. That word selective hung in the air like smoke. A guest near the bar muttered, she's embarrassing herself. Another whispered, they should have checked at the door. Phones tilted higher. The narrative was forming, live. An unwanted intruder, caught, shamed, erased. But she did not move. Her hands rested lightly at her sides, her breath steady, her eyes unblinking. The frosting sliding down her jawline no longer looked like mess. It looked like evidence, preserved. The manager's tone sharpened. If you don't comply, we'll have you escorted. He gestured toward the entrance where 2 security staff lingered, uncertain but ready. We can do this the easy way, or the hard way. She tilted her head, just slightly. The smallest curve of a smile, not amusement, but recognition. She had heard this tone before. In Charlotte, in Miami, in Dallas. Always the same script. Always the same arrogance disguised as policy. A ripple broke the pattern. Near the back, a young journalist raised her phone higher. Her whisper carried further this time. She hasn't said a word. Not one. And they're still pushing her out. Her companion nudged her to stop, but the phone's red light blinked on, recording. At the center of the storm, the woman in white finally moved just one step forward. The frosting had reached the neckline of her dress. She let it stay. Her voice, calm but edged with steel, cut through the room. Am I disrupting your program? She asked the manager, her tone more statement than question. Or are you? The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was pressure. The kind that makes chandeliers tremble though no one touched them. The manager's words still echoed. We'll escort you out. But she didn't flinch. Not a muscle. Not a blink. She simply stood, frosting dripping in slow motion from her cheek to her collarbone, as if time itself had paused around her. The gala wanted noise. It wanted tears, protest, outrage, anything to prove her unworthy. But silence? Silence unnerved them. The hostess in crimson broke first. She doesn't even deny it, she sneered, her voice cracking louder than she intended. See? Fraud. Pretending to be someone she's not. A ripple of laughter tried to follow. but it died halfway, colliding with the weight of her composure. She turned her head slowly, scanning the room. The chandeliers above shimmered like interrogators. Every guest she looked at suddenly found the floor, the glass in their hand, the screen of their phone more interesting than her gaze. Her silence was not emptiness. It was indictment. At the bar, a man whispered, "Why isn't she saying anything?" His date replied, "Because she doesn't have to." The manager stepped closer, his authority wobbling. "This is your last warning." He gestured again toward security, who now edged forward, unsure whether to act. But her calm was a barricade. Every step they considered taking felt heavier under the eyes of the crowd, under the invisible charge in the air. She finally breathed in, slow, deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was low but sharp enough to slice marble. "You want me gone?" she asked. "Then you'll have to say why, out loud, for everyone here." The manager's mouth opened, but no words came. The hostess filled the gap, her tone shrill. "Because you don't belong. Look at you." She gestured wildly at the frosting, the dress, the absence of diamonds. "You're not one of us." There it was, the truth, stripped bare. The words no chandelier could soften, no champagne could disguise. Her silence folded over it like a seal. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She let the statement hang ugly, undeniable. Undeniable because it came from their own mouths. In the corner, the journalist whispered, "Got it," and zoomed in. The red light on her phone glowed brighter, capturing not just images but intent. The woman in white turned her eyes to the ceiling. For a moment, she remembered another ceiling. Low, plaster cracked. A childhood church where her grandmother whispered, "Hold your tongue. Let them speak. They will reveal themselves." Tonight, they had. She lowered her gaze again, steady, unbroken. Security hovered, uncertain. The manager shifted from foot to foot. The hostess fumed, desperate for validation that no longer came. And through it all, she said nothing more. Because sometimes the loudest weapon isn't the voice. It's the refusal to let injustice drag you into its chaos. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the fuse. And the room had just lit the match. The chandelier light seemed harsher now, throwing every sneer and smirk into cruel relief. Silence from the woman in white had carved a canyon in the room, and into that space, other voices began to fall. Near the edge of the dance floor, the young journalist lifted her phone higher. "This isn't disruption," she whispered into the mic, her words bleeding into a live stream. "This is humiliation. Public. Intentional." The red light blinked steady, proof that someone beyond these walls would see. Two servers stood frozen with trays in hand. One, a boy barely out of college, whispered to the other, "She didn't even raise her voice. They're pushing her out for existing." His colleague nodded, jaw tight, eyes darting toward the manager but saying nothing. At table 7, a silver-haired woman lowered her champagne. "This feels wrong," she murmured, her voice trembling but audible. This isn't who we pretend to be." The man beside her, a corporate donor, shifted uncomfortably and muttered, "Don't get involved." But she already had. Her words were out in the open, heavy in the air. The hostess in crimson laughed, brittle, desperate. "Oh, please," she sneered. "Don't make this into something it isn't. She doesn't belong here. Everyone knows it." But everyone didn't. In the back, a college intern invited as part of a mentorship program gripped her phone, torn between fear and fury. Finally she spoke, voice cracking but clear. "She does belong. I saw her name on the program list. She's a sponsor." Heads snapped toward her, some in shock, some in annoyance. The manager barked, "Quiet," but the silence that followed was broken now, fractured. A murmur rippled. "Sponsor? Did she say sponsor?" The doubt was planting itself, stubborn, impossible to unhear. The woman in white hadn't moved. She hadn't wiped her face. She hadn't defended herself. But others were starting to. A guest near the bar lifted his phone, angling it for a better shot. "People need to see this," he muttered. Another followed. Screens glowed one by one, constellations of accountability blinking into existence. The hostess felt it slipping. "Don't film this," she snapped, her shrill tone betraying the crack in her confidence. But the crowd ignored her. Once the first voice broke silence, the rest followed like a tide. The journalist spoke louder now, no longer whispering. "She hasn't spoken a word. Every insult, every push, that's all them. And it's on record." A young man in a gray suit, clearly nervous, added, "Policy doesn't sound like that. Policy doesn't humiliate. His words caught in the air, echoed by nods and murmurs. And through it all, the woman in white remained steady. She did not thank them, did not gesture, did not shift her stance. She let the witnesses gather, let their voices layer into something undeniable. Her silence had summoned them, and once summoned, they would not go back to silence. The first voices of dissent had cracked the room, but the ones in power rushed to patch it back together with force. The manager straightened his tuxedo, jaw set like stone. "Enough," he barked, louder now, as if volume could mask guilt. He stepped forward, pointing a polished finger at the woman in white. "You're trespassing. You're a fraud. And if you don't leave this instant, you'll be arrested for disrupting a charitable event." Gasps fluttered through the crowd, but they were quickly drowned by another laugh, high, sharp, poisonous. The hostess in crimson twirled the microphone cord in her hand like a weapon. "Arrest her?" she echoed, smirking. "Please do. Nothing would honor this night more than keeping our stage clean." She swept her arm toward the woman in white, cake still dripping from her cheek, as if presenting evidence of her unworthiness. "Look at her. She doesn't belong in a place like this. No pedigree, no invitation, no value." The word value landed like a gavel. At table 4, a heavy-set man in a tailored navy suit chimed in, emboldened. "I've chaired this gala for 10 years. I know every sponsor. She's not one of them." He raised his glass as if to seal the verdict. "Throw her out before this becomes a circus." Phones tilted higher, catching every insult, every declaration. The woman in white still didn't move. The hostess leaned into the microphone again, her voice sliding into mockery. "Do you hear that silence?" she asked the crowd. "That's the silence of someone caught. No defense, no explanation, just a con artist hoping to crash a night she doesn't deserve." Some guests laughed again, nervous, eager to stay aligned with power. Others frowned, uneasy, but too afraid to speak. A woman in pearls hissed toward her husband. If she really belonged, she'd say something. He nodded, relief in agreement, as if repeating the lie made it safer. The manager motioned sharply to security. "Remove her," he ordered, his tone shaking now with frustration. 2 guards in black suits edged closer, their hesitation visible, but duty pulling them forward. From the corner, the young journalist shouted, "She hasn't done anything wrong." Her voice cracked but carried. The hostess snapped back, venom in every syllable. "Stay in your lane, little girl, or you'll be out too." The tension twisted tighter, a rope straining under too much weight. The crowd had split half jeering, half whispering, all waiting for the next blow. Through it all, the woman in white stood steady, eyes locked on the ones who mocked her. Every word they hurled only wrote themselves deeper into the story she already knew was unfolding. The insults were louder now, sharper, desperate. But she didn't need to answer, not yet, because every insult was a confession, and soon they would realize whose courtroom they were standing in. The word remove had barely left the manager's lips when the hostess seized her moment. She strutted closer, microphone still in hand, and with a flourish tore the name card from the woman's table setting. She held it high for all to see, shaking it like contraband. "See?" she shouted. "No seat, no place, no right to be here." The card crumpled in her fist, paper collapsing like dignity under her grip. Gasps scattered through the hall, but again laughter tried to chase them down. The manager followed her lead, his voice now booming through the hall's speakers. "Security, confiscate her badge, escort her out. If she resists, call the police." 2 guards stepped forward at last, their hands brushing the radios at their belts. One reached for the lanyard around her neck, fingers grazing the silk of her dress. The contact broke the room open. "She hasn't done anything," the young journalist shouted, her phone still raised. The red recording light glared like a warning beacon. The hostess turned on her, eyes flashing. "Film all you want. Fraud looks the same from every angle." And then she struck again. From the dessert table, she snatched a silver platter, an entire cake untouched. With deliberate cruelty, she smashed it against the woman's shoulder, frosting exploding across fabric, sliding down to the marble floor. The hall gasped in unison. "You don't belong here," she screamed into the microphone. "Not tonight, not ever." The insult wasn't just words now. It was physical, violent, undeniable. The woman in white didn't stumble. She didn't flinch. She stood anchored, her gaze steady, her silence louder than the crashing platter. Phones shot higher. Guests rose from chairs. One whispered, "This is assault." Another muttered, "They've lost control." But the ones in charge only pressed harder, desperate to stamp her out before doubt spread further. The manager snarled, waving to security again. "Get her out now. She's contaminating this event." His words cracked with the kind of authority that knows it's slipping away. The guards stepped closer, but hesitation painted their faces. They weren't dragging out a drunk guest. They weren't handling a trespasser. They were standing inches from a woman whose composure felt heavier than marble columns. The hostess, sensing their doubt, doubled down. "Do it," she barked, "or I'll have you both replaced before midnight." Frosting dripped onto the floor like melted wax, each drop punctuating the silence that followed. The woman in white finally raised her chin, eyes sweeping the hall, locking on every camera, every witness. She still hadn't shouted, still hadn't fought, still hadn't defended herself, but the stage was set. The insults had peaked. The evidence had written itself into the walls. And now, the storm was ready to turn. The hall still rang with the hostess's scream, "Do it!" Her voice was shrill, desperate, clinging to control she no longer had. Security hovered, unsure whether to obey. The guests leaned forward, phones raised higher. The marble floor glistened with frosting, sticky, shining like evidence under a spotlight. And then, finally, the woman in white moved. Not to fight, not to flee, but to reach. Her hand slipped into the clutch at her side. Calm, deliberate. She withdrew a phone, sleek, black, silent. The crowd leaned closer, murmurs rippling. What could a phone do here? Against guards, against managers, against humiliation baked into every chandelier? She pressed one button. The line clicked instantly. On the other end, a voice answered without hesitation. "It's happening?" Her reply was steady. "Log this moment. Activate the protocol. Now." Every word was clear enough for the microphones to catch, for the cameras to record, for the witnesses to whisper into their streams. The manager frowned, confused. "What are you doing?" She didn't look at him. She didn't look at the hostess still dripping with venom. She looked past them, as if speaking to someone far above their reach. "Yes," she said into the phone. "Escalate to full documentation. Pull contracts. Flag every sponsor line tied to tonight." The hostess blinked, momentarily off balance. What does that mean?" The woman in white didn't answer. She didn't need to. Somewhere beyond the marble walls, a system was waking up. Databases, accounts, contracts. The invisible scaffolding that held this gala together began to hum, unseen but unstoppable. The young journalist whispered into her phone, astonished. "She's calling someone. She said contracts. This is bigger than it looks." The guards froze mid-step, the authority in their orders unraveling by the second. The manager tried again, louder. "Stop this nonsense. That phone call doesn't change a thing." But already it had. She turned her gaze on him at last. Her words were quiet, measured, carrying the weight of inevitability. "You've already changed everything yourselves," she said. "All I did was let you speak." Her silence had been the fuse. This call was the spark. The hostess scoffed, clinging to the last shred of mockery. "You think you can scare us with phone calls? Who do you even think you are?" The woman in white didn't answer. Instead, she held the phone higher, her posture calm, commanding. On the other end, the voice returned, crisp, precise. "Protocol engaged. Systems live. Standing by for your word." The room stilled. For the first time that night, laughter didn't follow. Something invisible had shifted. The storm had begun to gather. The phone still glowed in her hand, its screen a quiet command center. The voice on the other end held steady. "Systems live. Standing by." The words were calm, almost surgical, but to the crowd, they landed like thunder. The manager sputtered, trying to wrestle back control. "This is absurd," he barked, though his voice trembled. "You're bluffing. Nobody here knows you. Nobody here owes you a thing." Her eyes met his, cool, unwavering. "On the contrary," she said softly, "every crystal above your head, every candle on these tables, every dollar funding this spectacle, every piece of this night owes me." The room shifted. Murmurs crackled like static. Guests glanced at one another, frowns forming, questions rising. Phones zoomed closer, capturing the moment with trembling hands. The hostess laughed again, but this time the sound wavered. "Please," she scoffed, though her eyes darted. "No one here believes you." The woman in white stepped forward, cake-stained silk trailing like battle scars. She raised the phone toward the ceiling microphone. "Confirm," she commanded. The voice on the line obeyed instantly, echoing through the speakers. "Confirmed." the primary sponsor of tonight's gala, committing $4.2 billion over 10 years, is present. Identification: her name, owner of the funding trust, principal stakeholder. Gasps tore through the hall. Someone dropped a glass. A guest in the front row whispered, "That's impossible." Another corrected, "No, it's true. Her name's on the charter." The hostess staggered a step back, color draining from her face. The manager froze, his hand still mid-gesture toward security. Even the guards shifted, suddenly uncertain who they were standing against. The woman in white didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She let the silence grow heavy around her, wrapping the revelation in weight none of them could ignore. "I don't need your permission to belong here," she said, her tone like steel pulled from fire. "I built this room. I funded this night. And every laugh, every insult, every ounce of your arrogance was paid for with my signature." The chandelier light no longer mocked her. It crowned her. A murmur surged into a roar. Some guests clapped, startled into solidarity. Others shrank in shame, hiding behind glasses and programs. Phones everywhere captured the stunned faces of those who had jeered minutes earlier. The hostess's microphone slipped from her fingers, clattering against marble. The sound cracked like judgment. And in that moment, the hierarchy flipped. She was no longer the silent target of their mockery. She was the owner of their stage. Her silence had set the trap. Her truth had sprung it. And now, the reckoning was unavoidable. The name still hung in the air like a verdict. 4.2 billion. Principal stakeholder. The words had detonated inside the marble walls, and now the aftershocks rippled through every corner of the gala. The hostess stumbled back from the stage, eyes wide, mascara trembling on lashes that had never known doubt. She reached for her champagne, missed, and clutched the stem of a chair instead. "No," she whispered, but the microphones caught it. "That can't be true." The manager's face drained pale beneath the ballroom lights. His hand, still frozen mid-command toward the guards, dropped uselessly to his side. He swallowed once, twice, but no words came. The authority that had fueled him minutes before was gone, replaced with the unmistakable tremor of a man who had just realized his career was ash in his mouth. The guards themselves stepped back, as if distance could erase their part in the spectacle. One muttered under his breath, "She owns it? She owns this?" The other shook his head, pulling his hand away from the radio as though it had burned him. Around the room, the crowd fractured. Some clapped hesitantly, then louder, until pockets of applause broke into thunder. Others hid their faces, embarrassed to be caught laughing earlier. A few shouted in support, "We see you! She deserves respect!" The sound swelled, chaotic, but undeniable. The room was turning. Phones streamed every angle. Screens glowed like fireflies in the dark, each one a witness, each one a record. The young journalist grinned through tears, whispering to her mic, "They tried to erase her, and it turns out she owns the eraser." A man in a Navy suit, the same, who had declared she wasn't a sponsor, slid lower in his chair, tugging at his collar as if the fabric had turned to rope. His wife glared at him, lips tight, as if she knew their names would appear in the footage, frozen in complicity. The silver-haired woman at table 7 began to clap harder, standing now. "Bravo," she said, her voice cutting above the noise. "Bravo for holding your silence until their own words condemned them." The hostess turned on her, panic sharp in her tone. "Stop clapping! She's not, this is a trick!" But her words rang hollow, drowned beneath the rising applause. Her microphone lay abandoned on the floor, mute, powerless. The woman in white stood calm in the center, cake stains and all, while the chaos spiraled around her. She didn't smile, didn't bow, didn't seek validation. She simply let the truth breathe in the room until it filled every corner. For the first time all night, the marble hall belonged to her, not by contract, not by charter, but by the undeniable recognition of everyone present. And for those who had mocked her, jeered her, assaulted her, the collapse had already begun. The ballroom buzzed with fractured applause and frantic whispers, but her presence cut through it all like a blade through silk. She lifted the phone again, her voice calm, each syllable deliberate. "Log this," she instructed. On the other end, the voice answered instantly, steady and sharp. "Recording. Go ahead." Her gaze swept the room, the hostess shaking in crimson, the manager shrinking in his tuxedo, the guards frozen between orders and conscience. "Terminate the contract with tonight's event organizer," she said. "Effective immediately. Flag all associated personnel for removal from our vendor registry. Their access is revoked." A murmur tore through the hall. The manager staggered a step forward, face pale. You can't do that," he stammered. "This gala is—" Her eyes pinned him in place. "This gala," she cut in, "is mine." The voice on the phone responded with surgical finality. "Confirmed. Contract terminated. Registry updated. Access revoked." The manager's phone buzzed in his pocket, vibrating like a sentence passed. He fumbled it open. His face drained of color as he read the notification. Barred. Effective. Immediately. He looked up, lips trembling, but no words formed. She turned toward the hostess, who stood clutching her ruined dress, frosting still smeared on her hand. "As for you," the CEO said evenly, "your company will no longer work with any partner under my trust. Effective tonight, your bookings end here." The hostess gasped, staggering back as if struck. You can't blacklist me!" But already other guests were watching her, shaking their heads, pulling away. Her network was unraveling in real time, thread by thread, contract by contract. The woman in white did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her silence had built the stage. Her words now dismantled it, brick by brick. Finally, she looked back to her phone. "Send the memo to all sponsors. Tonight's footage is evidence. Ensure every board sees it before morning." "Understood," came the reply. Memo drafted. Distribution scheduled. The silver-haired woman at table 7 clapped again, firmer this time. Others joined, the sound swelling into something undeniable. Approval, solidarity, vindication. The manager collapsed into a chair, staring at the floor as though it had betrayed him. The hostess covered her face, mascara streaking, her laughter from earlier now, a hollow ghost. The guard stepped back fully, retreating into the crowd. Justice was not loud. It was clinical, precise, irreversible, and it had just unfolded under every chandelier, every camera, every witness in the room. The ballroom had fallen into an uneasy silence, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from consequence. Every chandelier still glowed, but their light no longer crowned the stage, they exposed it. The frosting on her dress had dried into pale streaks, a visible scar of their mockery. Yet she stood tall, center of the room, no longer target but tribunal. She lowered the phone at last, slipping it back into her clutch with deliberate calm. No need for further commands. The damage was done, irreversible, echoing beyond these marble walls. Her eyes moved slowly across the crowd. Faces dropped, phones trembled. Guilt burned hot where arrogance had once thrived. Some looked away. Others met her gaze and flinched. A few still clapped, hesitant at first, then louder, feeding courage into the space. She raised her chin, and her voice cut through the hall like judgment delivered. "You thought tonight was about exclusion, about gatekeeping, about reminding me I didn't belong." Her words hung heavy. No music dared to play. "But here's the truth you keep forgetting." She paused, her eyes locking on the hostess, the manager, the guests who had laughed the loudest. "I don't need to belong to your rooms. Your rooms already belong to me." The hall erupted not in laughter, not in mockery, but in stunned recognition. Applause swelled, clashing against the shame that smothered her accusers. Some stood to clap. Others shouted, "Yes!" and "Tell them!" The sound filled the marble space until even the chandeliers seemed to tremble. She let the noise build, then lifted one hand. Silence returned, obedient. Her final words landed like a gavel. "I don't need a video to go viral. I don't need an audience to validate me. I am the result you tried to erase. And tonight, you didn't erase me. You revealed yourselves." The sentence fell into the room, absolute, unanswerable. She stepped back from the center, shoulders squared, every inch of her radiating the kind of power that didn't shout it endured. The applause rose again, carried by guests who understood they had just witnessed something far larger than a gala. As she moved toward the exit, phones stayed raised, capturing not just her walk but the wreckage left behind the hostess, trembling in disgrace. The manager slumped in defeat, the witnesses who had found their voices. Outside, the night air was cool, quiet, untouched by the storm inside. She breathed once, steady, and for the first time all evening, allowed herself the smallest smile. Not because she had won, but because she had reminded them, and everyone watching, that dignity doesn't beg for space. It claims it.